Welcome back to Zorilla HOA Stories. Drop your country or city name in comments. Chapter 1. The Dream Move-In. When we first pulled in the neighborhood, I thought I'd finally made it. The street was lined with maple trees, every house with a perfect green lawn and trimmed hedges. Kids rode their bikes in quiet circles. Neighbors waved as if they had been expecting us. For the first time in years, I felt like I belonged somewhere peaceful. We unloaded the boxes slowly, and within minutes, she appeared. A woman in a beige cardigan and sunglasses walked straight across the street as if she owned it. She didn't even glance at the moving truck before calling out, "Welcome to the neighborhood." Her smile was wide, but her eyes never moved from me. "I'm Karen," she said, "president of the HOA. We run a tight ship here." The way she emphasized tight ship made me laugh nervously. My wife muttered a polite "thank you" and carried a box inside. Karen didn't leave. She walked up to my front gate, ran her hand along the post like she was checking for dust, and added, "We like to keep everything perfect here. No exceptions." I said, "Of course. We'll do our best." Her smile tightened. "Good. I'll be keeping an eye out." That was our very first conversation. And from that moment on, I realized Karen wasn't just a neighbor. She was watching. Over the next week, we tried to settle in. New curtains, new flower pots, simple little things to make the house feel like ours. Every time I stepped outside, I caught sight of Karen somewhere, watering her plants while staring at me, standing on her porch pretending to check her phone, even walking her dog past my driveway 3 or 4 times in the same hour. I told myself it was harmless. Maybe she was just curious about the newcomers. But the feeling grew heavier. One morning, while hauling recycling to the curb, I noticed Karen across the street again. She was leaning against her car, arms folded, watching me drag the bins. No smile this time, just silence. I waved awkwardly. She didn't wave back. The Real warning came on the 4th night. It was late, around midnight. My wife was asleep, and I had stayed up unpacking in the living room. The house was quiet, the neighborhood darker than I expected for a place with so many street lamps. That's when I heard it. Creak. The sound of metal, slow and soft, coming from outside. I froze, listening. It came again, louder this time, the sound of my front gate swinging open. I put the box down carefully, heart pounding, and stepped to the window. The yard looked still. Nothing moved under the porch light. I waited, holding my breath. Then I opened the door and stepped outside. The night air was cool, and the street was silent. The gate was open, wide open, but the sidewalk and road were empty. I scanned left, then right, and just before I turned back toward the house, I saw her. Karen. She was standing 2 houses down, almost hidden in the shadows, arms folded again, watching me. I called out, "Did you open my gate?" No answer. She only tilted her head slightly, then turned and walked away into the dark. I shut the gate slowly, the metal latch rattling in my hands. Something about the way she left, no explanation, no words, made my chest tighten. This wasn't neighborly curiosity anymore. It felt like a warning. And the very next morning, the envelope on my porch proved it. An official HOA notice with my name printed at the top, citing my very first violation. Chapter 2. The First Notice. The envelope sat on the porch like a threat. Plain white, stamped with the HOA logo, slid halfway under my doormat. I picked it up, my stomach tight. My wife leaned against the doorway, rubbing her eyes. "What is it?" she asked. I tore it open. The letter was short, sharp, and cold. Violation number 001. Improper placement of trash bin. Bin was left visible on the curb past community hours. There was a $75 fine. I stared at the paper, speechless. "We just moved in," I muttered. My wife frowned. "That can't be right. It was only out overnight." Before I could answer, there was a knock on the railing. Karen. She was standing right there on the porch steps, holding a clipboard. Her sunglasses hid her eyes, even though the sun hadn't fully risen yet. "Morning," she chirped. "Saw you got the notice. Just want to make sure you understand. We enforce all the rules equally here. No exceptions." I held up the paper. "It's been 1 week. This is ridiculous." Karen's smile thinned. "Ridiculous? Rules are what keep this neighborhood perfect." My wife stepped closer. "It's a trash bin. We were unpacking all night. He just forgot. Karen didn't look at her. She didn't look at either of us, really. She just stared past my shoulder into the house, as if inspecting something inside. Finally, she said, "Consider it a friendly reminder." She tapped her clipboard once with her pen. "Next time, it won't be friendly." And just like that, she turned and walked off the porch without waiting for a reply. I thought that was the end of it, but it wasn't. 2 days later, another envelope appeared. Violation number 002. Garden hose not stored properly. Visible from street. This time, the fine was $100. I laughed out loud, but it wasn't funny. The hose was coiled neatly beside the spigot, exactly where anyone would keep it. I stormed across the street. Karen was trimming her roses with a pair of silver shears, calm as ever. "You call this fair?" I shouted, waving the letter. That hose wasn't hurting anyone. She didn't even flinch. The rule book is clear. No hoses in public view. You agreed to it when you signed the HOA contract. I took a breath, trying to steady my voice. This isn't about rules. This is about you. Karen's lips curled into a smile, sharp and deliberate. "Everything is about me," she said softly. "I am the HOA." The way she said it sent a chill down my back. That night, I sat at the dining table with the two notices side by side. My wife shook her head. "We can't keep paying these," she whispered. "I'm not going to," I said. "She's targeting us. I just need proof." I didn't sleep much. Around 1 a.m., I heard the sound again, metal scraping. The gate. I grabbed a flashlight, rushed to the window, and pulled the curtain aside. The gate was swinging gently, but this time I saw something else. A shadow moved across the yard. Slow, deliberate. I pressed my face closer to the glass, my breath fogging the pain. The flashlight trembled in my hand. And then I saw her. Karen. She was standing inside my yard. Inside, a tape measure dangled from her hand. She stretched it across my fence post, scribbled something onto her clipboard, then crouched down to measure the gap under the gate. My chest tightened with anger. I slammed the door open and shouted, "Hey, what are you doing?" Karen looked up calmly, not startled at all. "Routine inspection. You can't just come into my yard in the middle of the night." She tilted her head. "You signed the contract. Community property extends beyond the gate. Technically, this belongs to us." "No," I snapped. "It belongs to me." Karen straightened, clicked her tape measure shut, and gave me a smile so slow it made my stomach turn. "You'll learn," she said. Then she walked out through the gate, shutting it gently behind her. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. When the sun rose, I found a third envelope on my porch. Violation number 003. Fence height exceeds HOA regulations. Must be corrected immediately. My hand shook as I read it. 3 violations in less than 2 weeks. 3 fines. And now, Karen was crossing into my yard like she owned it. I looked up and down the street, searching for anyone who might have seen. That's when I noticed my neighbor across the road standing on his porch, hands in his pockets, staring at me. When our eyes met, he quickly looked away, almost like he was afraid. Chapter 3. The Warning Whispers. The morning after the 3rd violation, I stood on my porch staring at the letter. My fists were clenched so tight the paper crumpled in my hand. Across the street, my neighbor was out sweeping his driveway. He kept glancing at me, then quickly looking away, like he wanted to say something but was scared to. I couldn't take it anymore. I crossed the road. "Hey," I said. My voice was sharper than I meant. "You've seen her, right?" "Karen. She was in my yard last night." He froze mid-sweep. The broom bristles hovered just above the concrete. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then he leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You don't want to talk about that out here." That stopped me. "What do you mean?" He looked over his shoulder toward Karen's house. Her blinds were half closed, but it felt like someone was watching. The neighbor dropped his broom and motioned for me to follow. We stepped into his garage. He pulled the door shut, and suddenly it was just the two of us in the dim light. "Listen," he whispered. "Karen runs everything here. The board? It's her. The rules? She makes them up as she goes. If she doesn't like you, she'll bleed you dry with fines until you give up." I shook my head. "That can't be legal." He laughed bitterly. "Legal doesn't matter. She's got the bylaws. She's got friends on the board in the next neighborhood over. And she's got everyone here too scared to fight back." I stared at him. So you're telling me she can just walk into my yard at night and nothing happens? He nodded slowly. Happens all the time. You're not the first. She checks fences, lawns, windows, anything she can use against you. I felt my stomach twist. Why hasn't anyone stopped her? His eyes darted to the closed garage door, as if Karen could still hear us. One family tried. They called a lawyer. A month later, they sold their house. No one's seen them since. His voice cracked a little. Don't make the same mistake. I stepped back, my mind racing. So you're saying I just pay her? Let her do this? He didn't answer. He picked up his broom again, his face pale. Then he whispered, almost to himself, don't cross Karen. She always wins. I left his garage feeling more unsettled than before. Every window, every yard, every parked car on the street suddenly felt like an eye staring at me. When I got home, my wife asked, what did he say? I forced a smile. Nothing. Just neighbor talk. But inside, I was boiling. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every creak in the house made me flinch. I kept checking the gate, half expecting it to swing open again. Sometime after midnight, I finally gave up trying to sleep. I walked to the kitchen for water, and that's when I saw it. Through the window above the sink, something moved. A shadow, sliding slowly across my yard. I pressed against the glass, straining to see. It was Karen. She was back. But this time, she wasn't measuring the fence. She was kneeling near my flower bed, pressing something into the dirt. I rushed to the door and yanked it open. Karen. She froze, then stood up slowly. In her hand was a small orange flag, the kind surveyors use to mark property lines. 3 more were already planted in the soil around my yard. What are you doing? I demanded. She gave that same thin smile. Correction. Your yard is 3 feet over the regulation limit. I'm marking it for adjustment. That's insane, I shouted. Karen stepped closer to the porch light. Her face looked calm, but her eyes were hard and cold. You'll learn, she said. Then she pushed the last flag into the dirt, turned, and walked out the gate without another word. The next morning, a 4th envelope was waiting on my porch. Violation number 004. Unauthorized landscaping beyond property line. And beneath it, in handwriting I didn't recognize, was one chilling sentence. This is just the beginning. Chapter 4. The Caught Intrusion. By the 4th violation, I was running on anger instead of sleep. Every morning brought a new envelope, a new fine, a new excuse for Karen to dig deeper into my life. But the flags in my yard were different. They weren't just warnings. They were a claim, like she was carving up the ground under my feet. I pulled them out one by one, snapping the plastic stems in half and throwing them onto the driveway. My wife watched from the porch, arms crossed. She's not going to stop, she said quietly. I know, I muttered, but neither am I. That night, I set my alarm for midnight. I told myself it was stupid, that she wouldn't dare come back again so soon. But deep down, I knew she would. The alarm buzzed, and I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake my wife. I sat in the dark living room with only the porch light glowing outside. The house was silent. Minutes crawled by. Nothing. Then, click, the latch on the gate lifted. I rose slowly, heart pounding in my ears. Through the curtains, I saw the shape of the gate swinging open. And there she was, Karen. She slipped inside my yard like she owned it, flashlight in one hand, clipboard in the other. She crouched near the fence, her light sweeping over the boards. Then she pulled out the tape measure again and started writing. That was it. I yanked the door open and stormed into the yard. What are you doing? She straightened instantly, but she didn't look guilty. She looked annoyed. Inspection, she said. At 1 a.m, I snapped. The HOA reserves the right to check properties at any time, she replied smoothly, as if rehearsed. My fist tightened. This is my yard. You don't set foot in it without permission. Karen stepped closer, her flashlight beam sliding over my porch, my windows, my car. You should be careful with that kind of talk. You signed a contract. You're bound to the rules. No, I said firmly. I'm bound to my property. And you're trespassing. Her smile returned, thin and sharp. Big words for someone with 4 violations in 2 weeks. Before I could answer, a voice called from across the street. Everything okay over there? I turned. It was the same neighbor who had warned me before. He was standing in his yard in his pajamas, clutching a phone. Karen's head snapped toward him. Her voice dropped into a hiss. "Go inside. This doesn't concern you." The neighbor froze. For a second, I thought he'd retreat. But instead, he stayed where he was, eyes locked on me. "Do you want me to call the police?" he asked quietly. Karen's face went pale, then red. She whipped back toward me, her voice low and venomous. "You think anyone will believe you over me? I am the HOA. You're nothing but a newcomer." Then she shoved her clipboard into her bag, pushed past me, and marched out the gate. The latch clanged shut behind her. I stood in the yard shaking, every muscle tight. My wife came out onto the porch, confused and frightened. "What happened?" she asked. I stared at the gate. She was in here again, measuring, writing things down. My neighbor across the street lingered a moment longer, then slowly went back inside. The glow of his phone screen was the last thing I saw before his door closed. My wife put a hand on my arm. "You can't fight her alone." I nodded, but my mind was racing. Proof. That's what I needed. Something she couldn't twist, couldn't deny. That's when the idea started forming. Something simple, something harmless, but impossible to ignore. If Karen wanted to keep sneaking in, I was going to make sure the whole world saw it. Chapter 5. The Blue Paint Trap. By the 5th violation, I'd stopped opening the envelopes right away. They all said the same thing. Some made-up rule, another fine, another reason to remind me that Karen was always watching. But after catching her in my yard with that tape measure, I knew I couldn't just argue anymore. Talking didn't matter. She twisted everything to her advantage. What I needed was proof. I spent the next day at the hardware store, wandering the aisles like I was planning something criminal, even though all I bought was a gallon of bright blue paint, a brush, and some tape. At home, my wife watched me from the porch as I started painting the inside of the front gate post, thick, sloppy strokes that would smear on it anything brushing against it. She shook her head. "This is crazy." "No," I said. "This is harmless. If she tries to sneak in again, she won't be able to hide it." "What if she blames you?" "She always blames me," I muttered. By the time the sun set, the paint had dried sticky, a bright smear of color hidden just inside the gate latch where no one would see it, unless they touched it. That night, I sat by the window with the lights off, waiting. Every sound outside made my chest tighten. The bark of a dog, the rattle of leaves, the hum of a car rolling by. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. Then creak. The gate. I leaned forward, breath sharp in my throat. Through the dark, I saw the outline of the gate swinging open. A shadow slipped through, small, quick, familiar. Karen. She crouched low this time, flashlight beamed tight against the ground. She reached for the latch with her bare hand, and I saw it. The smear of blue across her fingers as she pushed it open. I gripped the edge of the curtain, barely able to hold back a laugh. She walked deeper into the yard, scribbling notes on her clipboard, blue streaks now smeared across the pages. When she reached for the fence, she left another mark on the wood. She didn't even realize. My heart pounded as I grabbed my phone. I snapped photo after photo from the window, her flashlight, her clipboard, the blue stains growing brighter under the beam. Finally, she turned to leave. As she pulled the gate shut, her sweater brushed the post. Another streak of blue, this time across her sleeve. Karen paused, noticing it for the first time. She lifted her hand, stared at the paint, then spun around as if she expected someone to be standing there. But she didn't see me in the dark window. Her face tightened. She wiped her hand on her skirt, but the blue only spread. She stormed out, slamming the gate so hard the latch rattled. The next morning, I walked outside to find another envelope on my porch. But this one was different. The handwriting on the front wasn't the usual neat type. It was rushed. Inside, the violation was almost laughable. Violation number 006. Unauthorized alteration of community property, front gate. Immediate removal required. At the bottom, scribbled in pen, were 3 words. "You'll regret this." I crumpled the paper in my fist. My wife looked at me with wide eyes. "What now?" she whispered. Before I could answer, a voice drifted across the street. It was my neighbor, the same one who had warned me before. He stood at the edge of his driveway, his voice low but urgent. "Be careful," he called. "You don't know how far she'll go." and then he glanced nervously toward Karen's house. Her blinds twitched. She had been watching us the whole time. Chapter 6. The Betrayal Next Door. For a few days after the blue paint incident, the street was quiet. Too quiet. Karen didn't show up at my gate. No new flags. No midnight intrusions. But I knew she wasn't finished. One evening, I stepped outside to water the flowers. My neighbor, the same one who had whispered his warnings in the garage, was standing on his porch. For the first time since I moved in, he didn't wave. He didn't nod. He just stared at me with a blank face, then turned and went back inside. I frowned. "That's strange," I muttered. When I told my wife, she said, "Maybe he's scared. Maybe Karen talked to him." I wanted to believe that, but the next day proved otherwise. I was coming home from work when I saw it. My neighbor standing on Karen's porch, talking to her. Not nervously, not secretly, comfortably, like friends. Karen laughed at something he said, her hand resting on her clipboard. Then she leaned in as he pointed directly at my house. My stomach dropped. I parked the car and sat in the driveway, gripping the steering wheel. He had warned me. He had seen what she did. And now, he was standing with her. By the time I got out, they were gone. That night, another envelope waited for me. Violation number 007. Suspicious activity reported by neighbor. Multiple witnesses confirm. There was no fine this time, just a threat of further action. I crumpled the letter and stormed inside. My wife followed me to the kitchen. "She's turning them against us," she whispered. I slammed my fist on the counter. "She doesn't have proof. That's why she's making them her proof." But even as I said it, I remembered the way my neighbor had looked at me earlier, cold, distant, like I was already guilty of something. The tension only grew. A day later, I noticed two neighbors standing on the sidewalk across from my yard. They weren't talking. They were just watching. When I stepped outside, they turned away. But when I went back inside, I caught them glancing again. Word was spreading. Karen wasn't just harassing me anymore. She was poisoning the whole neighborhood against me. That night, I couldn't rest. I paced the living room, staring out the window every few minutes. My wife tried to calm me, but I couldn't shake the image of my neighbor whispering on Karen's porch. Around midnight, I finally sat down on the couch, exhaustion pulling at me. That's when it happened. Bang! A sharp noise outside. I jumped up, heart racing, and ran to the door. The gate swung in the wind, wide open again. But this time, there was no Karen. Instead, my neighbor stood just beyond the fence line, phone in his hand. His face was pale, his eyes darting nervously as if he hadn't expected me to come out so quickly. "What are you doing?" I shouted. He lowered the phone slowly. "Karen told me check. Said your gate's a safety hazard." My blood boiled. "You're spying for her?" He swallowed hard, glanced toward Karen's house, and whispered, "You don't understand. She has files. On everyone. If I don't do what she says," he stopped himself. "Then fight back." I snapped. "You warned me about her. And now you're helping her." He shook his head. "It's too late." And with that, he turned and walked quickly back to his house. His porch light flicked on, and the door slammed shut. I stood in the dark, the gate swinging at my side, the cold air stinging my skin. That's when I noticed it, on the inside of the fence smeared across the wood. Another mark of blue paint. Fresh. Someone else had been here. Chapter 7. The Paint Explosion. The night after catching my neighbor outside the gate, I didn't sleep at all. I sat in the living room with the curtains pulled just enough to see the yard. The gate stood still under the porch light. The blue paint dried thick on the post like a silent warning. My wife begged me to come to bed. "She's not coming tonight," she whispered. But I shook my head. "She will. She can't help herself." And I was right. It started with the sound I knew too well, creak. The metal latch lifting, the gate swinging open. My pulse hammered in my ears. I pressed myself against the window, phone in hand. Karen slipped through the gate, flashlight beam cutting across the grass. She didn't even try to be quiet anymore. Clipboard tucked under her arm. She moved with purpose, like she already knew what she was going to write me up for this time. Then it happened. Her hand brushed the gatepost. A smear of wet blue streaked across her fingers. She froze, lifted her hand to the light, and cursed under her breath. I snapped a photo. then another. She kept going, using the flashlight, flipping through her clipboard, touching the fence, the siding of the house. Each time, more paint spread. Soon her hands were covered in it. She didn't notice she was marking everything she touched, blue fingerprints glowing in the beam of her own light. I nearly laughed out loud, but I held it in, my phone camera clicking quietly in the dark. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. She turned to leave, shoving the gate shut behind her, but her sleeve caught the post. The paint smeared across the beige fabric in a bright, unmistakable stripe. Karen gasped, staring at the stain. She tried rubbing it off, but the more she wiped, the worse it got. By the time she stormed back out into the street, her sweater was ruined, stained up to the elbow in glaring blue. I caught every second on camera. The next morning, the neighborhood was buzzing. When I stepped outside to get the paper, I saw her car pulling out of the driveway. Even from across the street, I spotted the sleeve, still faintly blue. And I wasn't the only one. Two neighbors walking their dogs stopped mid-step, whispering to each other as she drove past. Another man, trimming his hedges, stared openly at her car, eyes narrowing. For the first time since I'd moved in, Karen wasn't in control of the story. She was the story. I went back inside and showed my wife the photos. "She can't deny this," I said. She nodded slowly, though her voice trembled. "Be careful. When cornered, people like her get dangerous." I thought I'd won. I thought the blue paint was the end of it. But Karen wasn't done. That afternoon, another envelope landed on my porch. No fine this time, just a summons. Mandatory HOA meeting. Tonight. Attendance required. I stared at the paper, my throat dry. My wife looked over my shoulder. She's going to try to spin it. I crumpled the letter in my fist. Let her try. This time, everyone will see the truth. When night came, the community center down the street filled with neighbors. Folding chairs scraped against the floor. Voices buzzed in uneasy tones. I sat near the back, my phone in my pocket, the photos ready to show. Then the room fell silent. Karen walked in. Her hair was perfect, her clipboard clutched tight, but her sweater was gone. She wore a fresh blouse, spotless, like nothing had happened. She smiled thinly at the crowd. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice." And then, to my shock, she held up the ruined, blue-stained sleeve in her hand. "This," she announced, "is evidence of an attack." Gasps rippled through the room. Karen's eyes locked on me. "This homeowner deliberately rigged his gate to cause harm," she said. "And I have witnesses." Chapter 8. The Meeting Meltdown. The community center smelled faintly of old carpet and coffee. Every seat was filled, neighbors pressed shoulder to shoulder. The air buzzed with whispers, but when Karen raised her clipboard, the room fell silent. She held up the ruined sleeve again, stiff with dried blue paint. "This," she said, her voice sharp, "is vandalism. This is harassment. This is what happens when a homeowner thinks he's above our rules." Her eyes burned straight through me. I stood, fists clenched at my sides. "That paint got there because you broke into my yard. I have the pictures." Gasps rippled across the room. Heads turned from me back to her. Karen smiled thinly, as if she'd been waiting for this. "Pictures," she said, "taken without my consent? Neighbors, you see what I mean? This is obsession." I pulled out my phone and held it high. Obsession or proof? The room stirred as I tapped the screen. The photos appeared. Karen slipping through my gate, her hands glowing with blue paint, the stripe across her sleeve. I turned the phone so people could see. Murmurs swelled into voices. "She's inside his yard. She shouldn't be there at night. That's trespassing." Karen slammed her clipboard onto the table. "Lies," she snapped. Edited. "Do you really think this man, this newcomer, cares about our neighborhood? He's trying to tear us apart." A woman in the front row stood. "Karen, I saw you walking around his house last week. At night." Karen's smile cracked. "That's called checking compliance," she shot back. "It's my duty." Another neighbor spoke. At midnight. The whispers turned heavier now, some openly muttering, others shaking their heads. I stepped forward, voice steady. "She's not protecting this neighborhood. She's stalking it. And if she'll do it to me, she'll do it to any of you." Karen's face reddened. She pointed a trembling finger at me. "You don't belong here." I can have you fined, evicted." But before she could finish, a man at the back called out, "Enough, Karen." The room went silent again. Everyone turned. It was Mr. Lewis, one of the oldest residents on the block, someone everyone respected. He rose slowly, leaning on his cane. "I've lived here 30 years, he said, "and I've seen HOAs come and go. But I've never seen a president break into people's yards in the dead of night." Karen opened her mouth, but no words came. The meeting spiraled. Voices clashed, neighbors defending her, others demanding her resignation. Papers rustled, chairs scraped as people stood, pointing, arguing. Karen banged the table, shouting over them, "You don't understand. He's dangerous." But her voice cracked under the weight of the crowd. Her control was slipping. I turned back toward my wife, who sat in the corner, pale and tense. She mouthed 2 words, "Be careful." Then it happened. As the room roared with argument, I noticed something odd. A man slipped in through the side door, quiet, unnoticed by most. He wasn't holding a clipboard. He wasn't even holding a chair. He was holding a plain, brown folder. And the moment Karen saw it, her face drained of color. The man set the folder on the table in front of her. "Maybe we should all take a look at this," he said calmly. The room went dead silent. Karen snatched the folder, clutching it to her chest. "This has nothing to do with any of you." But the way her hands shook told everyone it had everything to do with us. Chapter 9. The Hidden File. The folder sat on the table like a live wire. Brown cardboard, edges frayed, sealed with a single rubber band. No one moved, no one spoke. Karen clutched it tighter, her knuckles white. "This is private," she hissed. "It doesn't concern any of you." The man who had placed it there folded his arms. His voice was calm, but firm. "Everything in that folder concerns this neighborhood. You know it, Karen." Gasps fluttered around the room. People leaned forward, eyes locked on her. I stepped closer. "What's in there?" Karen shot me a glare sharp enough to cut glass. "You think you're clever, don't you? You think you've exposed me." Her hands trembled as she tried to slide the folder into her bag. But before she could, Mr. Lewis's cane tapped hard against the floor. "Open it," he said. Karen froze. Her lips pressed into a thin line. She looked around the room, searching for someone, anyone, to back her up. But for the first time since I moved in, no one came to her defense. Her grip loosened. The folder slipped, landing back on the table with a dull thud. The man who had brought it stepped forward, peeled away the rubber band, and spread the contents across the table. A chorus of voices rose in disbelief. Inside were pages, dozens of them. HOA reports, but not the kind we'd seen before. These were receipts, letters, fines, and warnings from other neighborhoods. Karen's name was stamped again and again, tied to communities across the county. One neighbor whispered, "She's done this before." Another leaned closer. "Every place she goes, she runs the HOA, makes enemies, and leaves when she gets caught." Karen's face flushed. She slammed her palm on the table. "That's a lie. Those are doctored. You don't know what you're talking about." But the evidence spoke louder than her voice. I picked up a letter near the top of the stack. The words chilled me. "Formal removal of Karen Whitmore from HOA leadership. Cause: abuse of power, unauthorized surveillance, harassment of residents." My wife gasped. "Oh my God." I turned the page over. There was more. Notes from homeowners who had complained about her sneaking into yards, writing false violations, even tampering with property. It was the same pattern, the same sickness, and now it had landed on our street. The room boiled over. Neighbors shouted, "You've been lying to us. You made us think we needed you. You've ruined families." Karen staggered back, eyes darting, face twisting with rage. "You don't understand," she cried. "I saved those neighborhoods. They were falling apart without me." "No," Mr. Lewis said coldly. "You destroyed them." I thought it was over. I thought the meeting would end with Karen stripped of her power, humiliated and cornered. But then Karen's expression shifted. The rage faded, replaced by something darker, something calculated. She straightened her shoulders, smoothed her hair, and smiled. "You all think you've caught me," she said softly, "but you don't know the half of it." She turned her gaze on me, her smile widening into something almost triumphant. "You set that trap. You think you're clever. But I know things about this house. About you. Secrets you wouldn't want anyone else to hear. The room froze again. Every eye swung back toward me. I felt my chest tighten. What are you talking about? Karen only laughed. Not loud, not hysterical, just a quiet, unnerving laugh that echoed off the walls. Then she leaned forward, her voice a razor. You're not the only one who's been watching. Chapter 10, The Final Twist. The room was boiling over. Neighbors argued in every corner, their voices bouncing off the low ceiling. Papers from the folder still lay scattered across the table, proof of Karen's long history of destruction. But Karen didn't crumble. She stood tall in the center of the chaos, her smile stretched too wide, her eyes locked on me. You think you've cornered me? She said. You haven't. You don't know what I know. The room fell quiet again, as if every person had been waiting for her next move. I forced my voice steady. All we know is you don't belong in charge anymore. You lied. You broke into my yard. You've terrorized this neighborhood. Karen tilted her head like she was studying me. Then she pulled something from her clipboard, a small stack of glossy photographs. She fanned them out slowly, one by one. The breath caught in my throat. There were pictures of my house, not just the porch or the garage. The inside, my living room, my wife's desk, even our bedroom window, taken from just outside. Gasps filled the room. A neighbor whispered, she's been inside his house. Karen's smile widened. Yes, and what I've seen. She let the words hang in the air, dripping with menace. Maybe you don't want the whole neighborhood to know. I felt the blood drain from my face. My wife grabbed my arm, her voice breaking. She's bluffing. She has nothing. But I wasn't sure. Mr. Lewis slammed his cane on the floor, the crack echoing. This is finished, Karen. You've been exposed. You're done here. The crowd stirred in agreement. Heads nodded. A few people clapped. For a moment, I thought it was over. But Karen didn't move toward the door. Instead, she leaned closer to the table, her hands trembling, but not from fear. From fury barely contained. You can vote me out, she hissed. You can tear up my title. But you can't erase what I know. And you can't stop what's coming. Her words silenced the room all over again. Finally, Karen snatched the photographs back, shoved them into her bag, and stormed out of the community center. The slam of the door rang like a gunshot. Neighbors swarmed me, voices layered with fear and relief. She's lost it. She can't be allowed back in. What if she really comes after us? I couldn't answer. My hands were still shaking. We walked home in silence. The night air felt heavy, pressing down on us. Every shadow stretched too long, every sound too sharp. When we reached the house, I stopped cold. The gate. It was open again. The latch dangled, swinging softly in the breeze. I stepped closer, my chest tight, my wife clutching my arm. The post where the blue paint had dried days ago now bore something new. A smear, not blue, red, thick, fresh. And next to it, scrawled in jagged strokes, a single word. Soon. If you love watching my video, then make sure to subscribe and like my video.